Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to give a very simplified version of a thesis statement with examples that is guaranteed to get you the thesis point on an AP essay for World, Euro, or US history. First, I want to discuss what is possibly the most popular thesis statement formula and why I actually do not recommend it. And this is the John Irish Thesis Formula. Look, it is a great way to write a thesis, but it is also somewhat confusing. There are a variety of variations depending on what the prompt is asking for, and then several steps that are easy to get lost in. Below is an example of one of those variations. Now, I know there are some teachers out there that probably hate me for going against the John Irish formula, but there is an easier way to write a clear and concise thesis that will also get the point on the College Board rubric. I want to introduce you to the Purdue Online Writing Lab. It is a fantastic resource that I put a link in to the video information below. It will seriously come in handy for writing any type of essay in college. So here's their example for an argumentative essay thesis statement that I took from their writing lab. High school graduates should be required to take a year off to pursue community service projects before entering college in order to increase their maturity and global awareness. Okay, so let's take a look at that and put it into a very simplified formula. There are two key parts to the thesis. First is the argument, which comes in the first half of the sentence. High school graduates should be required to take a year off to pursue community service projects before entering college. Next are the main points, in which this has two, and that is totally fine. You do not need three main points. Two are enough. And the main points are increase their maturity and global awareness. That is it. This is not contingent on what type of prompt it is, whether it's continuity and change over time, turning point, or cause and effect. It will work on all of them. Do that and you have the thesis point. Let's take a look at some historical prompts and examples. Okay, first example. If you watch my Guessing the 2020 DBQ prompt video, this will look familiar. Here it is. Evaluate the extent to which debates about the role of the federal government led to division within the United States. Confine your answer from 1781 to 1804. The first thing I do is identify my main points. As I thought about the prompt, what sprang to mind was the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debate about the Constitution, and then the formation of political parties. Those formed even though George Washington himself warned against their creation in his farewell address. Next, for some reason, the College Board loves these, quote, evaluate the extent prompts. There are 100 other ways to write a prompt, but they love these. So generally, you want to respond on the side that whatever the topic is had a great impact. It is hard to argue little impact, because if something has little to no impact, then you're probably lacking the ability to use evidence from the docs. Okay, so I came up with the example you see here. The debates about the role of the federal government were the number one reason for division within the U.S. This resulted in public arguments and debates about the Constitution and the creation of political parties that were bitterly divided. Notice the argument is in the first part and the main points in the second part. Also notice those main points are fairly specific. The biggest reason students do not get the thesis point when they attempt it is because their thesis was too vague. Do not let that happen to you. Next, we have an example from periods 4 and 5 that combines expansion, slavery, and secession. So the prompt reads, evaluate the impact of the acquisition of new territories in the West had on American politics from 1820 to 1860. Again, I first identified my main points, and I will say this later as well. You should analyze the docs before writing your thesis statement. So consider those docs with your main points. Here are a couple of points that I have for the prompt. Almost all politicians were pro-Manifest Destiny. Some, which was a faction of Whigs, were split on the Mexican-American War. And ultimately, this expansion leads to debates about slavery, which leads to secession. There is a clear cause and dire effects change. So obviously, this had a huge impact. Let's put it together now. Quote, the acquisition of new territories had a huge impact on politics as most politicians were for Manifest Destiny. However, some had reservations about the Mexican-American War. And most importantly, it resulted in debates about expansion of slavery, which led to secession. All right, let's move on to example number 3. Okay, here we are jumping into period 7. Our prompt is a tricky continuities and change style prompt. Evaluate the extent to which the role of the federal government contributed to maintaining continuity as well as fostered change within the American economy from 1901 to 1941. There are a few different ways to approach this, and it might be contingent on the documents provided. But let's take a surefire way with clear evidence. So main points first. In this time period, you have two eras of great progressive change, 1901 to 1920 with the Progressive Era, and 1933 to 1941 with FDR's New Deal. What changed a lot was the government regulated businesses and protected consumers. It did other things as well, but remember, this is a thesis. Keep it concise. And what was the continuity? Well, while there were new regulations and growth of government's role in the economy, in general, the ideals of capitalism and opportunity were preserved. America did not go down the path like Russia did with the communist revolution. All right, so we know the great changes happened, but there were also a few themes of continuity. Let's put it together. Quote, the federal government played a great role in changing the American economy through progressive legislation that regulated businesses and protected consumers, while it continued to support a system based in capitalism and opportunity. Okay, let's wrap up with some final important tips. Number 1, make sure you understand the prompt. That is the first thing you do when you receive the DBQ. Read and reread the prompt. Know exactly what it's asking you and what you need to do to answer it. Next, go through the documents. And if you are really struggling with the topic of the prompt, there is an easy fail-safe. Take 2 of the main ideas from 2 of the documents and make them your main points in your thesis. That way, you will end up using those 2 docs to prove your main points in your body paragraphs, thus guaranteeing you 2 out of the 3 document usage points. And lastly, for the love of God, do not do this. There were many social, political, and economic changes. That has never and will never get you the thesis point. Be more specific. Okay, I hope this video helps you on the AP exam. Subscribe to the channel for more exam prep and primary source analysis.